This is Discourse Lab. I'm Anthony Rispo.
And I am Clayton Smith.
On this podcast, you'll hear a wide range of perspectives from an ideologically diverse suite of guests.
Our goal? To use conversation to analyze ideas, test arguments, and question dogmas. Now, let's head into the lab. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Discourse Lab. We're going to start off unconventionally. My wife just brought me a jar of pickles to open. I tried opening it with my bare hand and could not do it. So you're going to see me live try to open this jar of pickles. Oh, with a glove. Oh, my God.
That's going to sound weird.
These are really good. We get these at the farmer's market.
Look.
Wait.
I love
take
pickles.
the glove. Okay. Welcome to another episode of Discourse Lab. I thought that would be a funny way to start the show. Like, she came in right as we were hitting record and was like, wait, honey, can you open this for me? Yeah, those are really good pickles. I get actually at that farmer's market, I get spicy pickled okra.
I love
Okra's
that.
very
Okra, I don't
divisive.
care for that. I don't care for
I was going to say, very
Okay.
divisive. Some
You
people don't
started
like it.
You started spicy, and I was like, and then you said okra, and I was like, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah. I'm an okra lover. I love fried okra. I love the spicy pickled okra I get. It's like to die for me. So.
Well, maybe if I had it in that context, spicy, because I love that kind of stuff. So
I'm telling you, man, I will make you a fried okra convert. It's one of my favorite foods of all time. It's so good.
All right.
And okra's very good for you. I also get these, like, they do like pickled garlic, and I'm gross. Like, I know people are going to find this gross, but I will just eat like the pickled cloves of garlic, just pop them in my mouth.
So good for you, though.
It's so good for you. Yeah, it's delicious.
And if you want to avoid anybody, the day after, it's a perfect way.
I will eat one or two of them and go to give my wife a smooch, and she'll be like, hold on, dude. You smell like garlic. So I have to go use some mouthwash or something. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Just a fun anecdote. We're here to talk about, so I don't know, Anthony, maybe you can say it in your own words. Like, we had the idea to do this episode that was kind of focused around your ideas and the things you talk about on Instagram a lot, because a lot of the people that listen to this podcast and watch our reels and stuff are from your Instagram account. They've kind of come over from your following there. So,
Which, go on. Sorry.
I was just going to ask, like, how would you roughly define what it is that you are interested in, and what the kind of general overarching theme of, like, what you talk about online, what you research, read about, etc.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like it takes me a while to compute everything because it's just so much. So not you or what you're asking. It's just okay. So I think that I can give a pretty clear answer to this. And I, by the way, thanks for listening, everyone who has come to listen from the Instagram page, and it's been really fun to post these videos that it randomly will have these not the random insights, but randomly will have these decisions occur that or pop into my mind that I should talk about one thing or another related to political psychology, developmental psychology, or whatever. So I guess that's a good segue. My interest is, I'm interested in the convergence of developmental psychology and ideology, how we develop into our thought processes, how we interact with one another, and how that interaction is shaped by, childhood experiences. I mean, though that's an area, that's a contentious topic, because people often assume that childhood is the default template for who we become, how we become who we become, and it's not necessarily the truth or the full truth. But there's, and we'll get into it when we're going to talk about morality and pro-sociality, being pro-social, and how that develops. And so specifically, that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how in neural development from really infancy or even prenatal into infancy, into adolescence, so that those very critical periods of development and how that neural architecture is taking shape, pruning and synaptic connections are being made, and the brain is anthropomorphizing the brain by saying figuring out what it's going to keep and what it's going to leave behind, and
Right.
experiences shape that. And so there's all that neuroscience that is very important when it comes to understanding ideology, thought process, how we get along with one another, and then how that plays into our political leanings, um, and who we end up, you know, associating ourselves with,
Mhm.
if you
Well,
will.
yeah, it seems like, so to put it in layman's terms, what I'm hearing from you is like it's our psychology, our psychological, predispositions and proclivities are greatly influenced by our genetics, our early childhood. So you have that nature and nurture, but in
Right.
a state where we're like, we don't have much or really any control, and then we become adults and people that interact with other people in the world, and naturally people group up and find communities and find
Right.
religions and ideologies and all these things. And so the collection of individuals with all these different um, kind of preset moral and psychological proclivities and intuitions and such, interacting in groups is kind of what births ideologies and what steers them. It's like this meta effect, right? Of
Yeah. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these different things in one group. Am I getting that kind of right?
Yeah, it's a concept. Yeah, I mean, because it's nobody knows. Yeah, exactly. I mean, because like you said, genetics, even epidemiology has helped us
Mm-hmm.
understand things like post-traumatic stress disorder. There's just a whole slew of disciplines coming together to basically say to psychology. At one point, it's about 25 or 20-ish years ago when genetics really came onto the online with psychology, and basically said, we're going to give you a little bit of a boost because
Mm-hmm.
your measures and your assumptions are a little off track. So
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna come in and advance this a bit and elevate this. And so you have neurobiology, genetics, and other scientific disciplines, really elevating the science of psychology, of mental processes. But so that's the geeky kind of stuff that I'm interested in.
Mm.
But um, what I
Yeah. So
hope to
again, actually, I was too wordy. I'm sorry, just going to interject here. It's the connection between psychology and
mhm.
ideology. Like, put very simply, it's more. There's more to it than that. But really, you're looking at that connection between
Yeah,
what we believe, the things that the movements that we follow, and our
y
psychological states and predispositions.
yeah, right. So how does ideology emerge? How does it take shape? Um, and you know, and then specifically, how does it differ between political left and political right? People would be very surprised to know that
Mm-hmm.
there are not many differences when you whittle it down,
Mm-hmm.
um, in terms of cognitive rigidity, in terms of like how unwilling a person is to open some, to allow some daylight into their thought process. But anyway, the thing that I would say that I'm really interested in right now, though, is so you have all that stuff bubbling
Right.
underneath. But how to articulate that to people, how to get people to understand how this stuff is studied, how
Mm-hmm.
researchers come up with these concepts of these ideas and questions to test their hypotheses. How do you even derive a hypothesis? And what sorts of observations do you make that then become assumptions, that then become groundwork for testing those assumptions? And what happens when you have a system, for instance, like academia, in something like social psychology, when for a very long time it's influenced by outside forces like activism and politics,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then in kind of generating these false premises about observations. And by that I mean something like, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but this is an example. It's something like implicit bias or microaggressions, like the idea that just complimenting someone for their hair, a black woman for her hair,
Mm-hmm.
is considered a slight, or saying that you speak very articulately, things like this, or advocating for meritocracy. All these things are slights towards, quote, the
Mm-hmm.
oppressed class, and even if you didn't intend to be harmful, you still just harnessed within in the content of which you've said is by default harmful, and it's not up to you to decide that. It's up to the person experiencing it. And so this has been a project of social psychology for a long time, but the problem is they haven't found a good way to measure it accurately with good validity. And so just to close off what I'm saying is I'm interested in showing people how psychologists derive their questions and their hypotheses, and how those questions and hypotheses are often very much so ideologically, funny enough, informed by anything but scientific inquiry, if you will. And this is important because the more more conclusions that are biased does not, more studies and more conclusions doesn't mean better, a better possibility of finding the truth. It means you're just doubling down on falsities,
Again, to summarize, so you're interested in the connection between ideology and psychology. Yeah. And you're also interested in the methodology and the things that might be lowering the quality of research of that methodology. And interestingly enough, full circle, the thing that you are claiming is negatively affecting the methodology and therefore the quality of research, the quality of findings in psychology, social psychology, the study of ideology, blah 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 blah, is in fact ideology. It's biased towards various out. So it's sort of like full circle, right? I guess that pretty much sums it up, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely, and you can imagine my brain, in some ways it's easier. It's not easy, I shouldn't say that, but in some ways it feels so much better to study neurobiology and the stress response system and up and down regulation and cytokines and
well, because you're dealing at the level of substrates, which is basically it is or it isn't. It's biology, right?
Exactly, and it gives rise to certain behaviors, and then you can work within that framework, and you can say someone who is more predisposed to upregulation of the nervous, or has a predisposition to the inability to downregulate their nervous system. So that's just fancy talk for who can't calm down as easily as someone who could.
Yeah, who's high stress.
And there are genetic. There's a genetic component to that. It's not fully genetic. It's not. It's of course, like you said earlier, nature nurture. But some people are more predisposed to the incapacity to downregulate adaptively. They don't go back to homeostasis as quickly. And so to some degree, that kind of stuff to me just is so much easier because it's not this abstraction. And so I'll give you an example. The way a psychologist in social psychology will measure an attitude is through the Likert scale, from 1 to 5. You have to rank, so how much do you believe in X? Or what do you think of, or it's a statement like, I believe that blah, 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 blah should happen to this person. I don't know. Whatever the statement is, on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, 5 being very much so. Whatever. And then you have a midpoint there. You have 5, 3 is the midpoint, as the sort of people aren't sure. It could go one way or the other.
Right. Yeah.
But you're trying to extract, fundamentally, you're trying to extract someone's psychology from just simply from them reading a question or a statement and then jotting down, or not even jotting down, but circling a number. And there are
all sorts of things that can interfere with that, right?
Oh, tons of things. Yeah, tons of things. So go on.
I think the obvious one is oftentimes we do not fully understand what we think about something or how we feel about it. That is just a truth. We think something, or we think we believe something, but really we actually don't understand ourselves that way, or that well, excuse me. And then on top of that, it's just we are influenced by, even in situations where we are relatively isolated, we can often be influenced by what we think we should believe rather than what we actually do, especially if there are other people present, though, right? So there's all these things in those kinds of surveys that can mess with someone's ability to be fully transparent with what they actually feel.
that's social desirability bias. That's
Right.
you
The
don't
last
want
one
to
I talked about. Yeah.
right. You don't want to exactly. You don't want to appear if it's a scale or something that's measuring empathy or racism or whatever. You
Mhm.
know, all these different types of attitude scales. You're gonna you people tend to make themselves out to be better than they are.
Yeah.
And
Because
but
people,
anyway,
it's like, even if you're
yeah,
isolated, you don't want to admit to yourself that you're racist, right?
right,
Like, or at least
right,
a lot of
yeah.
some people are fine with it, right? But a
So,
lot of people don't. Yeah.
right, exactly. But even how we measure that, like the questions we ask,
Right.
it's so complicated because just to get a little more um, to zoom out a bit on this, like so you're looking at the statement, you're looking at the question, and you're circling something that aligns with your instinct about it, you know,
Mhm.
uh, and so they tally up the score. Say there's 15 questions. They tally up the score with the highest score being indicating a high propensity towards that attitude, and a low score, the opposite, a low
Right. Makes
expression of that
sense.
attitude.
High
Yeah,
is more, low is less.
right.
Yeah.
So then they have something to quantify. They've figured out how to capture something, and then they correlate it with another thing or various things in control for, um, just to put a lot of controls in there to see if that effect
Mhm.
still holds. So I mean, you
Right.
can have you know, something categorical like sex, like males, and empathy scores, and then you can control for other factors, like other
Mhm.
things, variables, I should say, and
Right.
see if that
Well,
correlation still holds, and if it
yeah,
does, then there's some kind of effect there,
and
you
correct
know.
me if I'm wrong, Anthony, but I think like the general way that we do that, kind of thinking big picture, or that researchers would ideally do that, is to just have size. It's just size, right? It's like if you're trying to measure sex, like male female correlations with certain psychological dispositions, let's say,
Right.
or let's say like aggression is a classic one. Like males, it's pretty well substantiated that males tend to be more physically aggressive, right? That
Yeah.
physical is important because females can be aggressive in like social ways. It's interesting, right?
Yes.
But like,
Yes.
you want to see if males are physically aggressive. Ideally, you either have a crazy huge study, maybe this is like unrealistic, where you measure large numbers of men from different cultures, and at different ages or something like that. So it's like you can account for the variable. Like if you have a cohort of men in the U.S. and in France and in India and in China and Japan, you can kind of hopefully cancel out with that, and you have large numbers of each of those groups, you can cancel out cultural effects of, like, let's say living in a Confucian based society versus like a more Western society, or like
Right.
a
Control for
Muslim
those.
group versus a Christian, or you can control for these things. So you can have a huge study that does that, or you can just do like a meta-analysis, or I guess like an overview of many different studies done at
Right.
many different times and places, and then hopefully you have a signal that like there's a fly right in front of this, drive me crazy, and it got on camera. That's going to drive me crazy. Sorry. But you can have like a signal that pokes through all of the noise, right? And a way that you can know that, like, oh, men maybe are more aggressive on average is across these different cultural differences, across time, across age.
Right.
You can see
Bone
the signal,
structure.
bone
Right.
structure, across,
Right.
all these different things. You can see this signal poking through all of that noise in the data, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good example of something that's really tangible that we can really pretty accurately measure, for
Mhm.
no question. But when you start to get into the abstract, you start to get into the mental process, um that's when it becomes tricky, because are you really capturing that thing you're trying to get? So I was saying that you then tally up the scores and you get a total. And what you find in social psychology, especially, is that now remember I said a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being
Right.
the most of whatever, 1 being the least feeling of that attitude. What you tend to get is a lot of people below the midpoint, or most
Mm.
of the sample below the midpoint. So,
That's
me,
interesting.
yeah. And the thing that's interesting is that what they report in these studies is statistical significance. And
Mm.
so chance, like how likely is this to happen if you were to take a random sample of the same population, blah 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 blah. Um, and if you have, let's say, males and females, males scoring, I don't know, 1.79 on something, and males scoring 2.4 on the same thing, that's still below the midpoint.
Wait, males? You said males and males. Did you mean males and females?
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So like males scoring like 1.79 and females scoring like 2.46 or something like that, right?
Sorry. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's still below the midpoint. But what's significant is the difference between that there's some kind of difference there in terms of trend, but it doesn't mean that the effect that what you're seeing is an over pronunciation of the thing you're measuring. It actually could be just that there's a lot of other noise going on, and it's not that it's nothing per se, but the problem is when we go to infer and we make these judgments based on these very small differences that are statistically significant. Now, in some cases, you do find in politics and political studies and other types of studies, you do find pretty stark differences, and that's interesting. But I mean, it's all pretty interesting, generally speaking. But when you don't have huge effects, it almost feels like you're kind of just going along for the ride and publishing just to publish a paper, and that's in fact what a lot of people in social psychology end up doing. They just end up publishing papers based on the p-value, and by that I mean just based on finding statistical significance. Sorry,
some background noise? No, it's fine. Keep going. Sorry, guys. No, we both record. We both have like families and stuff. So if you hear some background, you might have heard my dogs barking in the background. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I got some noise going on. I'm sorry, and you could see my precarious. But anyway, I don't want to inundate listeners too much with all this like p-value science stuff. I mean, I don't doubt that, and there's a lot of people that follow me on Instagram who give really great insights and probably understand all like.
I will say, just kind of teasing out what you just said a little bit more, because that's interesting. Like a lot of social psychology researchers will just kind of write papers, even if there's nothing like significant, or there's not a huge
effect
size or something.
Right.
But isn't there value in finding out like, oh, there isn't an effect here? Like if you have a good hypothesis, like, I predict women would be more, I don't know, likely to, like you'd have like women would be more likely to stop and pull over and, rescue a turtle trying to cross the road or something, because they're higher in empathy. And then you find that there's not a big effect size, or the unexpected effect size. Maybe it's like a little bit more to the male. Like disproving hypotheses is super important, right? Falsifiability. Like not having, there my dogs go. I don't know if you can hear them. Not having a clear understanding, or a clear effect that you would predict is informative, right? Because you'd be like, I wonder why that is. It leads to another question. So, maybe there is value in just all these papers that are finding no effect, right?
There's totally value in that. It's just that it doesn't get postured as such. It gets, if you don't have still they've been on this whole thing about about p-values. I mean, in psychology, anybody listening, you could Google it. Just Google psychology and p-values, and there's this entire infrastructural change with open science and pre-registration, and it's
let's pause. P-values. Explain p-values, and then explain p-hacking.
Okay.
As far as you understand it, because I think that is something we probably do have. Our listener base probably is pretty hip to this, but just in case they're not, like something like p-hacking and understanding the basics of like a p-value is actually not super common knowledge. So like go into that.
Okay, so first of all, p-value is a very tricky thing to understand. It takes psychology students and everybody who interacts with it a while. So p-value is the probability of observing a result as extreme as, or more extreme than, the one you got if the null hypothesis were true. So basically, the null hypothesis. You have the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis. So you're saying liberals are more empathetic toward liberals are more inclined to be active in social justice. I'm just picking
Mhm.
something
Yeah.
very that everybody knows as a
That seems very true as it is.
yeah. So that's your alternative. That's your hypothesis, and then the null hypothesis is liberals are not more, empathetic. Whatever.
Mhm.
It's your hypothesis with not. Okay,
Yeah, so
it's not.
it's pretty
Right.
simple. It's a fancy way of saying like I predict men are more aggressive, and the null
Right.
hypothesis they just aren't. They're just as aggressive as women. Like if the hypothesis men on average are more aggressive than women, the null hypothesis is men and women are roughly equally aggressive on average, physically aggressive.
Yeah.
And so the alternative hypothesis would be what, like the opposite, like men are less aggressive than women, or
Yeah.
what?
Say that. Yeah. So okay. So you have men are more aggressive than women.
Mm-hmm.
Men are not more aggressive than women.
Yeah, that's the null.
Yep. Right. So for instance, when you're looking at something like, okay, liberals score higher in, liberals and conservatives have equal levels of empathy. The alternative would be liberals score higher than conservatives in empathy. So you're trying to test levels of empathy between the two groups. And your statement is liberals score higher than conservatives in empathy. But the null is liberals and conservatives have equal levels of empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, so then if you have a p-value of 0.05, which is the standard p-value that you report in a study,
that's the minimum for an effect to be considered significant.
Significant.
Yes.
So if
so it can get higher than that. It's just that's anything less than a value of what is it? P equals 0.05. Is anything smaller than that is just not considered significant, and that's somewhat arbitrary, right?
It is. But, it is. It's an arbitrary cutoff, but
But you need to have a cutoff at some point, right?
Yeah, but the whole idea of p-values. I mean, I won't go down this whole rabbit hole. But the whole thing is just kind of nuts anyway. But so anyway, so let's say the study finds that liberals score slightly higher than conservatives in empathy, and the p-value is 0.05. That would mean if liberals and conservatives actually had equal empathy, then there's a 5% chance of observing results that extreme or more extreme just by random chance. So since
maybe I got that. Maybe I got that wrong then. So because it's been a while since I took a stats class a couple years ago, but it's not like my forte. A p-value is basically you're saying it's the likelihood that the null it's the likelihood that an effect seen is attributable to random chance, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
So you actually want a p-value to be smaller.
Yeah.
Because it's basically right. It's kind of like I had that flipped earlier. So a larger number for a p-value, so like a p-value of like 0.1 as opposed to 0.05 means that there's a higher chance. Oops, sorry, I hit my desk there. Means that there's a higher chance that the effect that you're seeing is not due to the thing you're attributing it to, but either to some other variable or to like random chance. And so you want that number to be smaller because you want the chance that the phenomenon you're observing is actually attributable to the cause that you are attributing to that phenomenon. You want that chance to be high, and you want it is like tricky. Stats is tricky.
Yeah, it is. So
it's small number good, small p-value good. So a p-value of 0.001 very good because it means there's a very small chance that the effect is attributable to random chance or some unknown other variable, and that and ergo the chance that the cause that you are attributing that phenomenon to is actually the thing that is causing that phenomenon is higher.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good
hopefully
way of
that makes
putting
it. It's tricky, right? Like I learned about p-values like 2 years ago and then didn't really think about it much. Okay,
it's
do you understand
a sticky point.
Do you understand p hacking just out of curiosity?
Oh, p hacking is it's manipulation of analysis or study designed to get statistically significant p-values. So
that's put most simply. I think we don't need to go into the weeds about it because it is complicated, and I've read about it many times and still.
Well, actually, it's kind of. It's so it's like, so for instance, like if you run,
so the basics is you're messing with the numbers to make the p-value seem smaller than it realistically should be.
You're running you're like running many different tests, statistical tests, and it's basically you're reporting the ones that are significant. Okay, it's as simple as that. It could be as simple as that, like where it's not even anything, geeky and using software. It's just you're literally reporting the ones that are significant and collecting more data.
You're cherry picking, and ergo your p-value is smaller, aka better, indicative of the effect you're attributing, or the cause you're attributing to an effect being the thing that is correct, right? So small p-value good, big p-value bad. P-hacking is messing with the numbers, primarily it seems like through cherry picking to make that p-value look smaller than it actually is if you were to include all of the data.
Yeah, that's pretty much, it's just to make yourself look good, and like you've got, and the problem with this is systemic. It's that you have the academic journals and the universities that bank on labs getting positive results, meaning p-values below the threshold. I mean, the p-values that are at that
above the threshold,
above the threshold, Right, of that point of statistical significance, 0.05. But for medicine, I should say the standard is 0.01. It's much more conservative. You can't screw up with biological stuff. But anyway,
well, that makes sense because people's lives are at risk, right?
Yeah. So, but the thing is, but even there, I mean, like it's such a contentious. I mean, it's such an annoying topic. The p-values have been so difficult because they, like I said, they're the gatekeeper for whether or not your paper gets published. And when that's the case, you have to publish lots of statistically significant findings. But like you said a few minutes ago, well, if the findings are not statistically significant, isn't that good information? Yes, it's excellent information. And the fact that that's ignored is really awful. All the papers that have negative results are gold. And because you're asking a question and you believe your question. Let's face it, people think scientists are just objective and impartial. They're not really. The goal is to put forth your question as honestly as possible and to test it through the rigors of the scientific method, to falsify your results, to show that your results can be proven wrong, incorrect. But
you wrote this in something you're going to publish, I think, something soon, and I was reading it before you put it out, and you made the good point in what I was reading that like the scientific method isn't an attempt to prove your hypothesis true. It's an attempt to like put up your hypothesis against. It's an attempt to try to prove it wrong, and then if you can't do that, that is indicative of a hypothesis that might be pointing at something true. Right?
Yeah.
So it's the way you think about it is you actually are trying to prove it wrong, which is why having all these papers that show no effect at all, or like very, very little effect, or very, very little chance of that effect actually being the effect that you're, or I should say, a very, very little chance of a cause actually being the cause of the proposed cause being the cause of the effect. I'm sorry, I'm getting super wordy right now. I'll back it up and just say that is why papers that don't show much of an effect at all, if any, are actually good, because it's saying like, actually this hypothesis we might have falsified it. We might have said like, oh, there's nothing here. And knowing what isn't true is oftentimes equally as important as knowing what is true, because it points you to what is true. Right.
Yeah. I mean, totally. And then the opposite of that is, publishing a study that looks at neural patterns of, neural activity in the brains of conservatives, and then giving them an empathy scale, and then testing their right-wing authoritarianism. You've just set up a perfect storm of positive results. Like, you're going to get positive results if you believe that the temporal parietal junction, which is a part of the brain that's active in theory of mind, the ability to mentalize, also like the ability to separate your own mental states from someone else's. It's important for empathy. If you see that there's a little like less activation there, when you give them a certain paradigm, a certain test in the fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, where you're sitting down in a tube and you're looking at something and your brain is being stimulated and they're measuring blood flow, and you see activity in certain parts of the brain that are responsible for social cognition and other affective or emotional responses, they'll take that and correlate it to, like, I don't know, an empathy scale or implicit bias scale or like a right-wing authoritarianism scale. And you have this perfect storm of all these great conditions. And then when you backtrack to a few minutes ago, we talked about wording questions and statements.
Right.
If you have a way of wording questions to persuade people to answer a certain way, you have a great storyline and boom, positive results. And so there's an asymmetry. So now we're getting into
you're rigging the study to kind of nudge your participants to the results that you want.
Yeah,
right.
And then you get an asymmetry, and this is a bit of a different chapter now, which is how ideology is, unfortunately, in academia, is a very left-leaning kind of ideological template from which researchers draw their hypotheses and their a priori basis of their research projects. And when you look at the social psychology literature, when it's measuring authoritarianism or ideology, you often see a pairing of various measures that inevitably lead to a result that you're looking for when it comes to conservatives, especially. One being right-wing authoritarianism and the other one being social dominance orientation. And very simply put for people, right-wing authoritarianism is basically a submitting to a power structure. I mean, that's a bit of a layman's way of going about, of explaining it. Because authoritarianism is a messy thing that's just starting to be ironed out since 2016, really. And then social dominance orientation is the affinity you have towards your own group, your in-group, and how much you actually denigrate or demean the out-group, or it's a social dominance orientation. You are socially dominant. Your orientation is toward favoring your group, and any other group outside your group is considered less than, perhaps. And when you put those two together, right-wing authoritarianism and SDO, you get a perfect narrative of conservatives are bigoted, they're racist, and but when you actually put left-wing authoritarianism with that as well, you get similar results. And at the end of the day, what it is you're finding you just get rid of all this terminology, and what you're getting is ideological rigidity and authoritarianism, which is apparent for both sides, which means a submission to a power, and then you just add the political leanings, and then you get something pathological.
It's like we've talked about this, I think, before, and I imagine this concept will come up many more times on the show, but like horseshoe theory, right? Like, it's not that like right-wing people are more authoritarian and left-wing people are less. It's that extremists on both sides tend to be more authoritarian, tend to care more about ideological purity, tend to care more, tend to be more rigid, so on and so forth. And we've talked about this in the past, and it's like, I think it's because there was so much interest in studying right-wing authoritarianism specifically in the 50s, aka just after World War II. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. There's probably a connection there, right? To put it mildly, right? I'm joking. Of course there is, right?
Yeah.
That so much social psychology research has been done on that it started to warp, or kind of maybe started out warped, where it's like less about right-wing authoritarianism, and more about how the right wing is prone to authoritarianism, more so than the left wing. Is I think what the point that you've made to me. I don't know as much about it, but that's how I understand it. Which seems historically silly in hindsight, because, all throughout the latter half of the 20th century, you had like a horrible left-wing authoritarian regime in the Soviet Union, and then several others popping up, right? Like North Korea, for example, is, I guess it's like a communist country, at least. It claims to be. I guess that you could argue that it's something different, but it's certainly the Soviet Union. And and a lot of people died. A lot of people got sent to the gulag. Like, it wasn't a good situation. So it's interesting that we weren't or social psychologists weren't as interested in that. If that's the case, Anthony, I don't know.
It is entirely the case, and it is absolutely staggering. It is one of the most incredible things that I think about all the time. No, it is amazing how, like you said, the gulags and all of that death and destruction, all of that forced labor, all of that
the Holodomor
propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, which happened earlier, but yeah.
All of the illusory progress that Stalin, tried to proclaim as, all of it for what? At the cost of what? It was to signal, like, he was authoritarian, and
very much so, yeah.
Yeah, and he wanted to posture the prosperity of Russia, of course, but it was all at the expense of the people, and it's this is it baffles my mind how but it's actually it's not that difficult to understand once you account for like you said, Clay, in the 1950s. I mean, you had I would say more, well, from the Soviet Union, but also from Nazi Germany, and after the war, you had what would the word be? An exile, or you had people coming from these places to America to find recluse, to find safety, and these were often your socialists, your academic, your academics,
lefty types,
lefty types, yeah. And Theodor Adorno was one of those characters. He wrote The Authoritarian Personality, and he was a cultural critic also. And that would be a very fun episode to cover him. He's
in detail, yeah.
Really interesting character. But the short version is that he wrote this huge thesis about essentially how conservatism is pretty much a gateway to fascism.
Right.
And but the measures that he created were flawed and really bad.
And they came with like pre-built assumptions that led them to be extremely biased. I will say, like, it seems, to the degree that I understand it, it seems like there is an obvious kernel of truth there. Like, he's getting at something true, which is that the extreme form of conservatism does tend to manifest as fascism. But the idea that an equivalent doesn't exist on the left, or that conservatives are more likely to roll into that extreme, or like kind of, descend into that extremist version of that ideology or that kind of worldview, is flawed, and that's where that bias comes in. It's like, of course, fascism is bad, and conservatives can become fascist, but also leftism, or I should say, like, things like extreme versions of communism and things like that also are authoritarian and also are bad, i.e. the Soviet Union, right? And right. That people on the left can also descend into that way of thinking that is just, colored more by leftist thought. But that's okay, right. So we were talking about something before the podcast that I want to get, I want to get to, and I want us to have recorded on this episode. And I think this is a good place to maybe kind of jump to that and then sort of follow our way back to what we were talking about right now. And that's moral foundations theory, made famous by Jonathan Haidt. He wrote a book about it. He's done a TED Talk about it. Maybe we'll link it in the episode notes. And so the way that this links up, right, is Theodor Adorno is talking about like the authoritarian mindset, the kind of underlying psychology of conservatives. And one of the things, you'll have to excuse me 1 second. Sorry, my dog got into the trash and was chewing on something. Again, I've got my dogs in here with me. This is great. Anyway, I thought I had to take it out of her mouth.
Must be something good, Clay.
Yeah, it's these
rubber. What is it?
It's these latex gloves that I use. I have to give one of my other dogs medication, and you can't touch it with your skin, so I use like latex gloves. It's the whole thing. And so, yeah. Anyway, so he's
So
talking
there's-
about the underlying psychology of conservatives, and in his theory, I don't understand it as well as you, so I want to make sure I don't misspeak here. But basically, his theory is that like conservatives, because of their underlying psychological proclivities or makeup, tend to go towards authoritarianism more than leftists. Is that more or less correct?
Yeah, he called it the F scale, the fascism scale, and he wanted to quantify authoritarian tendencies. And so, for instance, like I pulled up some items here just so we can segue into what we were getting at with moral foundations. It's conventionalism, rigid adherence to traditional societal norms, authoritarian submission, uncritical obedience to established authorities, authoritarian aggression, hostility toward those who defy conventional norms or authority. And, the list goes on. I'm not going to keep going into sexual repression, obsession with sexual behaviors of others. And so basically he wanted to show that he wanted to form a scale that would tap into a personality syndrome, traits that are susceptible to make people susceptible to authoritarian ideologies. But he was really focused on post World War II Nazi Germany, and that's where his mind was. It wasn't with
Again,
the
for
gulags
understandable reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. But like you said, and just to tie it up a bit, you see these behaviors. I mean, come on. When you look at the gulags, and all that death and destruction and suffering of the human being, it is on par with. It was. Am I going to get in trouble for saying it's on par with the Holocaust insofar as it's like in terms of.
I mean, in terms of number, first of all, let's be clear. We're not like Holocaust deniers or anything. Like,
oh no,
yeah, like millions of Jews died in the Holocaust. It was horrible. It was anti-Semitic. Like
6
million roughly, right? I don't know the exact number, but it is not inflated. Yeah.
No, and it's the extent of death is what I'm talking about. Under the rule of something dehumanizing.
The Soviet Union. I mean, like I mentioned the Holodomor, which happened in the I should know this 20s and 30s. Roughly, I should look that. I should double check myself, but it happened in the early 20th century, and that was basically a manufactured famine on the part of Soviet authorities, and like I think it's something like 4 or 5 million Ukrainians starved to death, and really, I mean, just stories of people resorting to eating their children and other people. I mean, like cannibalism, right? Like just horrific.
It's awful. It is awful.
I'm looking it up now to double check myself. Between 1932 and 1933, according to Google, which so I was just about correct. And the number is, let's see, according to the AI and Google here, again, just about correct. 3.5 to 10 million. So it's something like 5 million, I think, is guess. And that's just the Holodomor. And then you have, how many people were killed in purges and died in gulags and were murdered by the secret police. And I mean, you could even count Stalin's just horrific mishandling of the Second World War, what they called the Great Patriotic War in Russian. And maybe I can remember some Russian and give it to you in Russian. It's like the Velikaya Otchestvenaya Vaina is in Russihan.
That's right. You speak Russian.
Right? I'm super rusty, obviously. I studied it for a long time. Yeah, it's Velikaya Otchestvenaya Vaina, the Great Patriotic, or the Great, like, Fatherland War, basically. Anyway, I digress. So yes, I mean, in terms of the magnitude, it's totally fair, in my opinion, to compare, just in terms of like the level of human death and suffering, the Holocaust to the just the general death and destruction of the Soviet Union. Obviously, we need to point out that actually, even Russia has had huge problems with anti-Semitism as well. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion comes to us out of Russia, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of European anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is a thing.
What I'm talking about is
Sorry, I went on a tangent. I apologize.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm saying what it's important for people to understand, especially in this time of very hyper partisanship and where emotions are running high for good reasons, the social scientist or the psychologist or the person really investigating phenomenon, you have to zoom out and you have to, first of all, you have to say, okay, this is the observation. It's death and destruction under the hands of an authoritarian regime. That's at base level what I'm looking at. And it does, and the qualities therein or thereof at this point in the analysis, in the observation, to me is not important. It's that this thing is happening under one or a few people. Wow. So, then you get into the nitty gritty and the differences and all that stuff. But when you zoom out and you look at the level of death and destruction under Stalin and Mao and all those others, you see a pattern, and that pattern cannot be ignored. But it was in social psychology, and I go back to that, and so the now what we're doing, and getting back to moral foundations in a second, but just to finish this part up, what we're trying to do now is balance the asymmetry in research to look at things that are prevalent, looking at behaviors and ways of thinking that are prevalent on the left that tap into that authoritarian mindset too. And then now going to moral foundations, it kind of muddies the waters a bit, because when you look at some of and we'll talk about these foundations, it's very hard to say that, I'm a progressive, not me, but I'm saying one to say, I'm a progressive. I care about people. I care about, are my taxes going to all these programs? I care about rent control. I care about government-run stores. I care about. We need this stuff because it's compassion, the downtrodden. Okay, fine, but now that we're leveling the asymmetry and making it even, and starting to see how authoritarian tendencies and in-out group hostility occurs on the left, it's becoming more and more of a concern to me, and that's why I speak to it. I guess coming full circle, like to some degree, to the first question, it's concerning to me as a human being, but also as somebody who cares about research, to see this asymmetry and people just completely glazed over from this reality. And in order for us to really understand the tragedies of the past, we have to understand the psychology of it. We can't just look at it from a surface level purview and say, oh, this happened, this was all geopolitical, it was all for power. No. We've got to tap into the reasons, to the best of our ability, why people are led to these extremes. And we've done a pretty good job. And Adorno, he's kind of like a Freud, not really, but sort of like in a sense that where, all right, he saw something, he like you said, I mean, like he was tapping into something. It was just not a really good way of measuring it. But then along came a psychologist by the last name of Altemeyer.
Highly biased way of measuring it, right?
Yeah. In the 80s, someone came along, Altemeyer, his name was, and he sort of made the right-wing authoritarianism scale psychometrically better, meaning it's a much more solid reading of authoritarianism on the right. But then in comes researchers by the last name of Costello and Conway, who came up with a left-wing authoritarianism construct. And so now, full circle, we're seeing that these behaviors and mindsets cross talk. And jumping now into moral foundations, it becomes much murkier, because I'm going to give you the floor, because you were actually doing a really good job at explaining it before we got on. Let's see how we can bridge what I just said with what you're going to say about moral foundations.
Yeah, I think I wanted to talk about it because there's an obvious connection between, moral foundation, the very basic explanation for moral foundations theory is Jonathan Haidt kind of comes up with these, like, what he uses the metaphor of like moral taste buds, right? And these are actually, I'll have Anthony read them off because you have something pulled up, I think, so you can get the exact definitions. But basically, you have these different kind of like 6 different quote unquote taste buds of like moral categories that tend to be higher or lower in conservatives or liberals.
Do you want me to read them real quick?
Yeah, actually just but briefly though. And so the basic idea is that like liberals generally have like it's innate, it's something you're born with, a predisposition towards certain certain of these taste buds, and conservatives have a predisposition towards others. And it's important to note that, an innate predisposition is not like set in stone. Like, these things are still malleable. They are affected by our experiences. It's just that we start off with different. We're not all like, it's not like blank slate. We're not all in the same place when we're born. We have genetic predispositions that we inherit from our ancestors towards certain feelings or certain
ways that we respond, proclivities.
Ways that we respond in terms of disgust to different things. And so that's like the most basic version of it. But yeah, read out and I will say the reason the taste buds metaphor works so well is it's the same thing with actual taste buds, right? Some people can taste, some people like cilantro because it tastes good. I like cilantro. Other people are born with the ability to taste something in the cilantro that makes it taste like soap, right?
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, but then again, I guess you could learn to like that taste with, in the right circumstances. So
that's a really good precursor. That's a really good prelude to how we're going to jump into this. Actually, exactly what you just said right there. But
yeah, so go ahead and list off those 6 taste buds.
Yeah. So they are So it's their dyads. They're like 2 for each.
Well, there's like a negative. It's like a scale. It's like a negative, positive, right?
Right.
Each,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Negative, positive for each. Sorry. Yeah. But I'm trying to explain what I'm seeing here, and Anyway, so it's care, harm, and then the second one is fairness, cheating, and the third one is loyalty, betrayal. Fourth, authority, subversion, and the fifth one is sanctity, degradation. And is there a 6th one? Is that
Did I get that wrong? I was saying 6. There might only be 5. I think there are only 5.
I think one was added at one point. I think was it liberty?
Oh, I think you're right. It is like liberty, something else. It's a freedom metric.
If we're wrong,
I've got them
as
care, harm, fairness, cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, purity, degradation, liberty, oppression. So it is, I think, 6 as of now.
Yeah, that's what right, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, just to start us out, again, going back to what I said about creating a scale and all that stuff, you have to really operationalize, figure out what the hell these terms harness, how are you positioning this in your research? All right, care, harm, what does that mean? So they have it listed, I should say, as empathy, compassion, preventing suffering. So that's how they're operationalizing that idea, and so on and so forth. So so these are then broken down into 2 categories where liberals are categorized as having individualizing principles, which would be care, harm, fairness, cheating, and conservatives binding principles, which are loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation, and then there was the other one I think you'd mentioned.
Yeah. So, well, I think I would assume I wouldn't look into this. Because I read the book that Haidt wrote a long time ago and just rewatched his TED Talk. But it's what were the 2 things you said? It was individualizing and
binding.
And binding, right? So binding would be like fairness, loyalty, purity, or maybe like fairness, loyalty, authority, or authority, purity, and loyalty, something like that. And then fairness, liberty, and care would be like individualizing or something like that.
Yeah, I have this study here actually. So why don't you keep talking and I'm going to actually look. Yep.
We're going to include the link to his TED Talk, and the reason I think is interesting is it gets at something. So let me expand actually. So he has these like moral taste buds that we're kind of born with a proclivity to be, let's say, more caring, less harmful, more oppressive, less liberal in the other sense of the word, right? Or less, free, appreciating of freedom, I guess, so on and so forth, right? And so you have people who are, let's say, lean more towards purity, or valuing purity, loyalty, and authority. These are hallmarks of conservatives. And then you have people who care about like care, liberty, and what was the other one? And I'm totally keep forgetting. Care, liberty, and fairness are like more liberal. That's like an overgeneralization.
Right.
But then there's also this idea of, again, another great metaphor, the elephant and the rider. So it's this idea that humans rationalize their moral intuitions post hoc. We like to think that, like, we think about morality rationally, and that, like, well, I believe this is wrong or right because, of XYZ reason. But really, our moral intuitions are kind of gut feelings, and when you prod at them, it's hard to defend. So a good example, and this is something that Haidt uses, it's something similar. I'm going to use this maybe a slightly different example. I can't remember how he structures it, but the premise is the same, right? So you have like a brother and sister who are very close. They're like hiking in the Alps or something. They're taking a trip together, and they are staying a night in a cabin together, and they just, for whatever reason, decide that it would be fun to make love. And let's, in this scenario, all of the reasons you might, the rational reasons you might say that's wrong are not there. Neither of them have a partner, so they're not cheating. Both of them are fully consenting and not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. They're both adults, roughly the same age. There's no real power dynamic there. There is, one or both of them is sterile, so there's no chance of them having kids, or maybe one of them got, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my, well, you know what I mean. I can't remember the name of the surgery. I wanted to say castration. No, not castration. A vasectomy. Let's say the brother has a vasectomy. Something, that's the word I was looking for. Or something like that. So they can't have kids. They make love. They both really enjoy it. They decide never to tell anyone else. No one ever knows about it, so no one can get grossed out about it. It's just a secret between them. They feel closer. They feel better for it. They go on with their lives. Everything's good. Obviously, you listening to this, and I feel the same way, want to say that that's wrong, morally wrong. Like, that's gross, right? Like, a brother, I don't care, all the other stuff out the window, like, it's just gross for a brother and a sister to have sex. Many of you have siblings. The very thought of it is like, ugh, it's gross, right? But it's hard to say that it's morally wrong because no one is hurt. Everyone's consenting of their free will. Like, there's just nothing you can point to say, like, other than if maybe you're religious and you can say God doesn't want you to do it, but taking that out of the equation, like, there's no rational way to say this is immoral. So what that gets at is we think we have rational reasons for thinking things are immoral, but really a lot of it is just gut intuition. It's something built into us through evolution and genealogy and all of that. So
to evade problems in the future.
Right. And so this, there are like evolutionary reasons for why we develop our
inbreeding is not good, right?
Yeah, these inbreeding is not good. Like, these moral intuitions that we are built into us, namely, inbreeding is not good. There's higher chance of birth defects, but when you take away that chance, you still have the moral intuition. And so this is like the elephant and the rider, right? This is that metaphor where a guy is riding an elephant. The elephant is going to do what it wants. It goes where it wants. That guy has no actual physical control over that elephant. And let's say that, for the sake of this hypothetical, like, that elephant is not properly trained. He's just on top of the elephant. That rider will, like, post hoc rationalize, like, well, I whipped it on the butt this way, so he's turning this way, or like, I kicked it with my heels, so it's moving a little faster. No, the elephant's just doing what it wants. And to some degree, the rider does have some influence over the elephant. Like, he can kind of, like, have a say because the elephant's going to react to stimuli, but the elephant has the final decision and has more of influence. And the elephant in this case is your subconscious. It's your kind of pre-built moral intuition, and then the rider is your prefrontal cortex. Basically, it's your sense of, it's your logic, it's the self that is rationalizing everything that you feel and do, right? That's the other part, and that's important because it's like an integral part of the overall theory, because it kind of gets at this idea that, like, we have these inbuilt intuitions, and they're not something that we, like, come up purely out of rationality and reason and research and all that. They're built in, and we often do not recognize them. So it's important to recognize that fact. So that's the kind of more broad understanding of it. But then we were also, you and I, Anthony, talking about the things we think this theory gets wrong. Right.
Yeah. So about the rider and the elephant metaphor, it's very as we talk about intuition and all that stuff, it's very intuitive to use that because it taps into this, like you're saying, that subconscious, implicit response to our environment, and then the writer is the one that's reining it in, wielding it, bringing higher awareness to it, and it's almost like a system 1, system 2 thing where the elephant is system 1, automatic, the writer slow, rational, system 2, but the thing is, it's interesting because rational deliberation can shape or override intuitive responses via self-regulation, moral education, and a dialectical, more of a conversational approach with like your reflexes. Like we're always, there's always, because I don't know, I don't know if I think that I get what he's saying when he talks about that. I think it's a good visual, but our moral reactions are really more or less, they're not actually you were mentioning before, I think you said when you take away the chance, you still have the moral intuition. The thing about this theory, and we're getting into
why you take away
why
the chance of of birth defects and all of that come with incest, you still have the moral intuition against incest.
Right, and the
you
thing
can't
about
reason away that intuition.
And the thing is, it's a conflation. It's an error of attributing one thing to attributing a certain kind of process to morality that is actually different. And morality is really much more of a it's not so much that it's the elephant per se just kind of doing its own thing, and that there's this kind of reflex against something that's abhorrent or disgusting or whatever, and then that's morality. That's really more or less an evolutionary response, an autonomic response, a reflexive response to something that seems like a moral reaction, but like you'd mentioned, is more post hoc. And the reason why the research in infant pro-social behavior has helped us understand that, infants as young as 6 to 12 have helping behaviors. They'll, for instance, like, they'll helping behaviors, sharing behaviors.
You say infants as young as 12 is in 12 months.
6 to 12 months. Yeah.
6
Comforting.
to 12 months,
yeah. And some of these things, they look like rudimentary empathy. But they're actually spontaneous or reactive cues of distress. And the reason why we know that is because you need a prefrontal cortex. You need that executive reasoning to make that post hoc analysis to then derive a moral framework. But
theirs isn't fully developed yet? Is that the idea?
Say that again?
So like an infant's isn't fully developed, their prefrontal cortex, at least enough to make that rationalization, so it suggests that these moral behaviors, quote-unquote moral behaviors, are they're deeper than that.
They're reflexive, and they're for survival. They're not thinking about the rationale. It's survival,
We're a social species,
So precisely.
Cooperative species,
Right. So we're able to separate, to distinguish this pro-social reflex that we have as early as, like I said, 6 to 12 months or so, from the moral framework that we derive thereafter, which is roughly we start to become more morally inclined at around ages 3 to 5 when we develop theory of mind, which is the ability to separate your own sort of way of thinking or mental states from someone else. And you start to iterate. There's this process of this momentous process of integrating these different cues in the environment of what you ought to do, what you ought not to do. Oh, maybe I shouldn't shove this kid. Oh, maybe I should share. Oh, maybe, so these reflexes definitely are there, but now they become disambiguated and more integrated into the psyche, into the cognitive warehouse of the child, who then takes that with them throughout their life as a pro-social agent. And and then arguably a moral agent, but the moral foundations theory framework eh, tries to set itself up as this definitive starting state, built-in structure. But I guess we're going into the criticisms now. We have been. It turns out it's really not, because the degree to which you care about something, or the degree to which you don't want to harm something, the degree to which you're loyal to something could be ideologically influenced, often is, but fundamentally, these tap into more of those, I would say, these reflexes, but then they become more informed by the higher order way of, it's like integrating into the mind, like, I will be loyal to my church, I will be loyal to my family, I will be loyal to my friends, I care about the unborn, I care about the women who want to have an abortion. It's like, so we care in different ways, we're loyal in different ways. Yeah,
this is what you're getting to, like, with the critique of, like, Adorno, right? Is his methodology, there's so many built-in assumptions, and it's kind of something similar with the taste buds theory, right? These categories, these moral foundations, where it's like, we say that liberals are more caring and more concerned with fairness and liberty, but that's complicated by the fact, like, the thing I was saying before we were recording is, like, care, I feel like it's actually not care like exclusively for the liberals. It's care and loyalty are actually related, right? In a complicated, or maybe not so complicated way. Liberals have a higher degree of care for people who are in the out group. Conservatives have a higher degree of relative to the out group, have a higher degree of care for the in group. And that's loyalty, right? That's what I would kind of posit, right? Is it might be the case that liberals actually still care more for their in-group. It's just so natural, it's so human to care about your tribe, your team, your family, right? So liberals, if you're watching, I'm have my hand up here, right? Or if you're listening, I'm going to do something with my hand, so I'm sorry. But for those of you watching, like, if liberals are, or actually, no, if you guys are listening to this, let me change it up. If it's on a scale of 1 to 10, if liberals tend to be a 10, or let's say like a 9 for caring about their in-group, but like a 7 for caring about everyone outside of the group, right? Everyone who isn't in their in-group. And conservatives are like a 9 for caring about their in-group, but then like a 4 for caring about, or a 5 for caring about the out-group. They still have some care for people who are in the out-group. They're not so callous as to like hate everyone who isn't in their family or their country or whatever.
Well, going back to measurement.
It's just the difference. Yeah, it's just the difference, right?
Right.
And it's not that liberals don't care more about their in-group. It's that the difference between care for the in-group and the out-group is smaller, or something like that.
Right.
And so it's not as simple as saying liberals are more care and conservatives are more loyal. They both have care and loyalty as part of their moral frameworks. And I think what was the other thing we were saying? It was purity, right?
Right.
Purity is associated with conservatives in the moral foundations theory, and insofar as I understand it, right? But really, It's about the different kinds of purity. Like people on the left, I think we've all noticed, tend to care a lot about ideological purity. And in fact, this is why there's like all of this chaos in leftist movements a lot of the time, because there's so much ideological rigidity. That it's like hard for them to like coalesce and take collective action. Whereas conservatives care about a different kind of purity. Conservatives are, I think it's fair to say, probably more aligned with or more associated with like sexual purity, or something like purity as it relates to like not defiling the church by coming in dressed like a bum and like wear your Sunday best to church, right? Things like that. So it's different kinds of purity.
And go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, and the last thing is like, fairness. And this is something I think that they do, or like Haidt and others who kind of propose this, do actually kind of acknowledge, which is like equality, or what is it? Fairness could be fair opportunity and fair outcome, which we can define for this purpose of this conversation as, equality is fairness and opportunity, otherwise known as equality of opportunity. And then um, um, we could say that fairness in outcome can be equity, right? So equitable
Right.
outcomes. And so we recognize the nuance there. I think this is already kind of built into the theory, is the nuance of like fairness is kind of defined differently by conservatives and liberals. It's not that neither of them, it's not that one cares about fairness more than the other. It's how they define it.
And
right?
yes, and the most important, anybody listen, for those of you who are listening now and have a sense that, oh my God, these guys are talking about moral relativism. No. This is very, again, the bird's eye scientific view. This is not moral relativism. This is not denying that people are, draw from a shared moral toolkit, for instance. They're showing that scientists in this world of research are showing the application of that toolkit is flexible, and it's really shaped by specific issues and the person's ideological framework. But still, like Clay was saying, there's still a constant there of what fairness is, the quality of fairness, the quality of purity, the quality, but it just has there are differences once you incorporate ideology.
The important thing to note here is that this is about like subjectivity in a sense. It's trying to find a way to like objectively measure the subjective predispositions of people. It's about our intuitions about morality. It's about how we try to rationalize those intuitions. It's about labeling the kinds of things that trigger or do not trigger or trigger more or less our moral intuitions. It's not about what's saying actually what's right and what is wrong, morally speaking.
That's right. That's right.
So this isn't moral. We're not talking about moral relativism. We're talking about how people interpret and intuit morality.
Right.
And I'll say up front, like, I don't want to get too, I guess this is a kind of off subject, but kind of, or off topic, but kind of not, is I am personally a subscriber to moral objectivity. I more or less completely agree with Sam Harris's outlining of moral objectivity, which is if morality means anything, it means increasing good, what we would call good emotions like pleasure, contentment, happiness, joy, satisfaction, all those, synonyms. And then minimizing bad things like pain of the emotional, mental, and physical categories, right? Generally speaking. And that there are many, 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 many ways to live morally and support moral things in terms of supporting the good emotions, the good experiences, as I just defined. But there are way more ways to do it badly, and to do and support immoral things that support or reinforce the pain, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going off a tangent. I'm going to finish up real quick.
Please do. That's great, because I'm liking this.
This is where Sam Harris gets the idea of like the moral landscape. There are peaks and valleys. There are several peaks about like moral of like getting up to the moral high ground, right? Or like the heights of morality of good feelings, and then somehow even many more valleys and troughs and things like that. And so he kind of makes this analogy to like a landscape, to topography, right? If that's making sense to you all. So I very much subscribe to that. I think, Anthony, I don't know if you subscribe to that exactly, but you do believe in a moral objectivity of some kind, right?
I do. And I think, I think that I generally have found his to be most parsimonious and just easy to grasp onto, like something that's like, okay, we have this, at very base level, we don't want to harm. Now, some people do, and I can just hear listeners thinking to themselves, but Islamists, people who blow things up in the name of their religion, or anybody that does harm in the name
of cause, the
IRA,
cause. Right? Yeah,
right. But especially religion, especially like let's take
the IRA, right?
Yeah.
Don't forget the Irish are terrorists too, Anthony. Yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm part Irish. I can say that, I think.
Yeah, there you go. Mafia, Italian.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
but let's take the Islamic regime, for instance, and what it's predicated on, and basically just purely a death cult. And we can say, well, the the means that they use to justify the ends is one of a moral one, where they are, they might have this is where moral relativism comes in, and this is why it completely collapses and it's ridiculous, because you necessarily have to reconfigure the furniture to negate the premise that there's something that
there is a bedrock,
right? That there's and that harm is antithetical to human flourishing, to the evolution of the species for the betterment of all, et cetera, et cetera. And you can even measure that. You can even scale that in how an elevated, and this is a quick side note, an incidental. You can even scale and measure that biologically, neuroendocrinologically, by looking at levels of
neuroendocrino. Say that again. That's a $3.
Neuroendocrinologically.
Neuroendocrinologically. That's a great.
By looking at stress hormones, and elevated levels of stress for too long it leads to tons of Cushing's syndrome. Like it leads to opportunistic infections, leads to the denigration of memory, of it could aid in neurodegeneration, a bunch of things. Like if you think about it from a biological perspective, extended amounts of stress is very bad for you. So right then and there, a person is in a very precarious and volatile situation if they're put into that condition, which is why you get these downstream effects later in life, perhaps, like at higher levels, more of a chance. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that we can't just be relativist about this stuff, because there are actual biomarkers and true effects that you see when people are put in harm's way. And that is and you can, like I said, you can see that in one's biology. But anyway, I digress with that. All that's to be said, that now we're secure on this grounding that there is truly that harming others is not a good thing. And what do we do to mitigate that? We engage in our pro-social behaviors. Like I said before, like now there are people who have antisocial behaviors, and who show antisocial behaviors early in life, even at the age of 3.
The people who have like a predisposition towards antisocial behaviors, and this, I guess, would be connected to like sociopathy,
it would be psychopathy.
Psychopathy, not so. Yeah, so yeah, I misspoke. Psychopathy, or like narcissism, right? Things like these dark triad traits. Or I think,
yes.
Are we?
Yes.
I think we talked to Scott Kaufman at a dinner a while ago, and he was talking about the dark tetrad. So maybe it's that now. I don't know. Yeah,
the dark tetrad is this, and then we can go back, because this actually folds into what we're saying about the moral foundations, and in that. Okay, well, first, the dark tetrad is psychopathy, which is callousness, pretty much no empathy for others, consideration, and impulsivity too. And so that's psychopathy. And then you have Machiavellianism, which is manipulation. And then you have narcissism, which is self-obsession. Self-obsession. And you have different types of narcissism. And then you have sadism, which is the joy of others' suffering. And people can score high on sadism and low in the other side. It's very interesting stuff, but you can start to see behaviorally, from as early as 12 months, frequent hitting in children, biting, pushing with no distress. So that would indicate low affective empathy, the incapacity to have what's, emotional resonance, like be able to like tell that, to sense, oh, this is not good. And one might think, well, that's morality. You're thinking, but no, it's more of it's a temperament. It's a
predisposition towards certain behaviors based on one's temperament.
Which is why harm is always seen as the fundamental thing. It's that it seems that we are built with this, if anything, this predisposition to not harm. Again, like you said, because we're social species.
These tetrad traits, while they are disturbingly common, are not, like, the majority of people wouldn't score high on them, right?
No. It's upwards of 5% of the population. But
which suggests if most of us, like the vast majority of us, are low in those traits, relatively speaking,
right.
evolution is kind of selected for mostly for us to be pro-social.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I really quickly, because we've been going for almost an hour and a half. I don't want us to go too long, but I want to connect this back to like moral foundations theory and what we were talking about earlier too. Is like,
yeah. What were we get? Because I was trying to create a link.
Right. So you have these dark tetrad traits, and then you have the kind of moral foundations theory, these sort of quote unquote moral taste buds, and this all kind of feeds back into what we were talking about earlier, which is like a proclivity towards authoritarianism, towards ideological purity, like being obsessed with it, all of these like negative things that I guess through like the 50s, 60s, 70s, I guess the whole like second half of the 20th century, in that time frame, what researchers were concerned about with that was mostly on the right wing. But what you're saying is we're trying to catch up and notice similar things in the left wing, a proclivity towards authoritarianism, a tendency for these dark tetrad traits, I would assume, I'm kind of mashing this together and drawing my own conclusions, to be manifest systemically in political systems, in ideological movements. It turns out it's not more common on the right per se. It's that it maybe looks different, has a different flavor on the right than it does on the left, but it exists on the left with a slightly different flavor, a slightly different aesthetic, right?
Yes.
Maybe a very different aesthetic, but at the end of the day, the left left-leaning people can fall into authoritarian tendencies, and of course do. And these political movements can allow individuals on both the right and the left with these dark tetrad traits to rise through the ranks and have influence, and then that obviously influences their groups, the systems they set up, the structures they set up, which cause harm in all sorts of ways.
Right.
It's not just on the right. It's very much on the left, and we see it on the left. I mean, we have seen it on the left. That's the thing. It's not like that's new. Like we were just talking about the Soviet Union. That's
right.
I guess historically not that long ago, but it's not within my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting, right? Because you think about
the Soviet Union literally did fall like 4 years before I was born. So
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I know.
Yeah.
But you think about it, who was responsible for all that death and destruction? And it wasn't the constituent parts. It wasn't the people were, you had the kulaks who were stripped away from their farms, and
kulaks, for those who do not know, it's like a really rough translation would be like middle class farmers.
They were
peasants.
self-sufficient, and
they had like a cow or two. You know what I mean? They were
and they were self-sustaining, and they were scapegoated, and made an example of, and thrown into the camps, and
murdered, thrown into camps, had all their stuff stolen. Yeah,
right. And so when you think about it, it's not and I want to make this clear too. I mean, someone got on my case about. I did a theory of mind video about not reducing people to their categories, and they're like, "You do that about the left." I'm like, "No, you're saying I do that about the left as if I do that if I'm signaling that each person who's under the category of left leaning is the thing I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ideology that enshrouds leftism. I'm not talking about the constituent parts per se, because the people that are under that umbrella often aren't as pathological, or even at all pathological, as the upper echelons of the group. And and that's the thing, is like it just takes a few of those pathological types to make a viewpoint, make even an ideology sour and rigid and pathological. And so what we're seeing on the left today is a combination of many different theorists and scholars who, in my view, harbor some of those or score much higher in those like dark triad scales, and who have taken advantage of the vulnerabilities of the people who believe in them.
Yeah, and it's also worth double tapping on the fact that like this also, all of that exists on the right in a unique right wing way. You know what I mean? Like this, it's not that you're saying that the left is especially like this. It seems like you're interested in this for a couple reasons. One, because you think at the current moment it's a particularly interesting thing and particularly important issue.
We've reached a boiling point. We've reached
the boiling point. Yeah. It's not that it doesn't or hasn't or won't exist on the right. Like this propensity towards authoritarianism, this likelihood for people, dark tetrad heavy people to like rise through the ranks and have similar sorts of destructive policies put in place, right? That's all exists on the right as well. You just seem to be interested in the left because of your own personal background. Like you used to be very left wing and you got disillusioned, and so naturally you're interested in, you know.
Yeah. I that's very true, and that would be fun to insert, like to have like a fun lighter podcast episode.
We talk about our origin stories, and you talk about that. Yeah.
I think that'd be a lot of fun, and maybe pop up some pictures of me ugly crying when Trump won the first time, and like all these. I think we
pictures of you in the early 2010s are great.
I think it would be great to put some video clips into. I think that would be so much fun. We should totally do that, because I think you'd get it. You'd get it to record too. You'd get a kick out of it, and I think everybody else would. But yes, so I am interested because it's from whence I came, but it also coincides with my love for psychology and for research and honest science, and
it seems like there's a dearth of research, like you were saying, in the left, that you want to help play catch up.
Yes, it needs to do that, because otherwise we're just screaming into a void, and there's that the divisiveness will continue if we don't have better information out there that levels makes it more symmetrical. But I just want to say one thing. I just want to make sure that we, because I started talking about Stalin, not Stalin, the Islamic regime, and about. Oh, okay. I think we did wrap around and talk about how harm. Yeah. Okay, harm is not morally relative. It's that harm is a basis of. Okay,
it is the bedrock, like harm versus harm reduction / like joy. What's the word? Joy enablement or joy. There's a word I'm looking for and I can't think of it. I always do that on like live on the pod or like while we're recording.
I know what you mean.
Words.
I hate that.
That like dichotomy of like reducing pain and enhancing is the word I was looking for. Joy or pleasure is like the bedrock of moral foundations, right?
Yeah.
Intuition.
I think it's safe to say that. I think it's safe to say that that people in today's culture in America don't feel that way about the opposing partisan. I think that we're in a time where it's obvious there's a fracture, and nobody needs to say it. I said it, but okay, saying the obvious, and there's this belief that if you stand for something opposite of what I stand for, you're suspect, and you do see that on both sides.
Absolutely,
that doesn't go away, and I just want to make that clear, because I know my video, like we were just kind of get off on this whole thing about me talking about why I'm focused on the left, but it's very important, especially for the right now, or for Republicans and just people who jump ship from the left to always, I think just really check how you're thinking about other people. And I'm not giving you funny enough, a moral mandate. I'm really not. I'm not trying to say check yourself. Like, I'm not doing that. But I'm just saying, if you look at I put up a video about theory of mind on my Instagram, and if you listen to that, you'll see what I mean. It's just really important to, thinking about how another person thinks and taking perspective is not the same thing. And we said this earlier on in the episode. I think you did, Clay. It's not the same thing as agreeing.
This is the basis of this whole podcast, which is we want to explore ideas. And I will say, like, we haven't done too much of that yet. Like, I really want to get more into like the heart of what this podcast should be, which is to really explore ideas and play devil's advocate and put ourselves in the shoes of people we disagree with. And we're hopefully going to start doing that more. But yeah, like, understanding someone is not the same as agreeing with them. No. You're all listening to this thinking, yeah, no shit, like that's obvious. But it's crazy to me just the degree to which it seems like so many people in our country, in our society, in our species don't understand this basic concept that like actually understanding someone else is good. Empathizing with someone else is good. Even if they have horrible beliefs, because being able to empathize with them can help you better understand why they believe, why they advocate for what they advocate for, right? Like, it's okay to seek to understand, to be open-minded, to be empathetic. It doesn't mean you have to agree with someone or support them.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's beautifully said. And I will say though, if I encounter a bad actor or someone who is suspiciously antisocial in their psychology and antagonistic, my horns come out. I'm not gonna lie. Like
Yes.
it's just how it. I mean, you
Yes.
know, that's something that I have a low threshold tolerance for. I can
You tolerate
spot it.
take no shit. Yeah.
I don't take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But well,
right.
it's important to note that like that is completely separate. It's not contingent upon ideology, right? Like if you sense a bad actor, someone who agrees with you, disagrees with you, right
That's
or
right.
left,
That's
right?
right.
Like
That's
no
right.
matter where you are on the kind of political compass or whatever, that like XY graph, like with the 4 quadrants, it doesn't matter. If you're a bad actor, I agree with you. We should have very little tolerance for people who don't engage honestly, who engage in like, you know, fallacies like
Antagonistic.
straw men or like what's the other one? The big one. Oh my God.
Ad hominem.
Ad hominem. Thank you. Ad hominem attacks. That's like attacking something irrelevant about a person, their character, their appearance, that is irrelevant to their ideas, right? Things like the people who engage in that regularly and intentionally, you should not tolerate, until they shape up.
And you said it beautifully. It's ideology independent, right?
Yes.
Because and there's actually a principle in psychology called the dark ego vehicle principle, which captures exactly that. Is that you've got people who use political movements for their own gain and just to hop on a train and use it as a vehicle to exert or to express their, you know, virtuousness or whatever, but even more just sometimes even to just be antagonistic, and these are people without a political. I don't want to speak to the theory. It's a principle. It's not yet a theory. Last I checked, but I don't want to speak to it too much because it's still developing. But
it's interesting.
That's the dark ego vehicle principle. It's using these spaces as an opportunity to leverage your antagonism, your sadism, your all that kind of stuff. So that's you put your finger on a very intuitive pulse that actually is starting to be studied. So it's pretty
interesting.
Cool.
Well, so we've been going for over an hour and a half, and it's 9:30 my time here in Texas, and I promised my wife I would help her with something. So I think we do have to wrap up. I will say I very, very quickly want to hit on something about moral foundations theory again, which is we were kind of critiquing the categories, these kind of, as Haidt says, taste buds, these moral taste buds that we're born with. I will say I think we both still pretty much agree with the basic idea of moral foundations theory, right? Like we were critiquing the categories, and I will also say I haven't kept up with it. Like I'm basing this off of the book that he wrote many years ago. So there is a good chance that we're just not up to date with what people are talking about in moral foundations theory. So that we need to, I think it's important to acknowledge that. But at least as it existed in like 2000, I can't even remember when the book came out. That's kind of what we're talking about. What I will say, but again, we roughly agree with the idea. We both pretty much agree. Sorry, Anthony, I just trying to get this out. I'll let you speak a second. With the idea that the elephant in the rider idea, I think is pretty much right from what I can tell. This idea that our moral intuitions kind of precede our reasoning. Or our rationality or rationalizing, about them, which is not like, it's not black and white. Like obviously the rider in this metaphor can affect the elephant, and there is ways for reason to kind of affect our moral intuitions to a degree, I'm sure, but that's generally correct. Also the idea that these things are sort of, we're not a blank slate. Neither of us believe in blank slateism. The idea that people were born with different predispositions in regard to moral intuition. We very much agree with, and the idea that there is probably a good way to categorize our moral intuitions, and that even though we were critical of those categories for being maybe a little less nuanced and a little overly simplistic and not divvied up in the right way, that there is a there there, that's getting at something very true, and that they're onto something, right?
I was only making the gestures because I actually don't, I mean, as far as the taxonomy, the structure, having the different foundations, I think of it as a taxonomy, but I don't think that the evidence holds that it's
interesting.
A good okay.
I'm saying that there's like a seed of an idea there that's probably getting at something true, even if the taxonomy as it's laid out,
the taxonomy,
at least originally, is not solid.
I see what you mean. Like the actual content there, like the categories
concept.
themselves.
Yeah.
The categories themselves hold weight. Yeah, but
the categories themselves are probably not ideal. Like they're not well structured, or they don't like, we were critical of the categories, but the idea that liberals and conservatives on average are going to value certain things in certain ways differently, and that's links to a predisposition that is inherited, and that those intuitions that are different on average between liberals and conservatives are innate, and also are not fully rational, or not even mostly rational, that they are something that is felt in the gut rather than thought through,
and I think
are rationalized post hoc, right? I agree with all that. That seems to make sense to me.
I think a better, just to close my perspective on it, and is maybe a very fruitful place to pick up another time, because it seems like we are diverging in certain spots, but it's fine. It's good. Yeah, because I think the better place to look for update on this is a paper, Values in Context, the DIS, they have in parentheses DIS, and then Connections Between Moral Foundations and Moral Conviction by Paul E. Teased, I don't know. And this was published in 2024. And this is the paper that I used to sift through and look at how they broke down foundations and made it more relative to, like you saw, that these different foundations really apply depending on the situation, and how moral foundations is a good taxonomy to give a label to these different moral groupings, but it doesn't the way that Haidt and this entire program has studied it is pretty rigid in the way that it assigns.
Too rigid.
Yeah, too rigid. But maybe somewhere here in the mix we're missing each other.
I think we're kind of actually getting at the same thing, where it's like the basic idea is like they're onto something, but the way that they've kind of laid it out might need some pretty serious tweaking.
And this is it's moral conviction, which is really the thing that I would say, if people want to dig into it, moral conviction versus, well, look at moral foundations too, but like then contrast it with moral the research on moral conviction. We'll put that in the show notes.
We'll continue to. I think this is a good episode because it was fun. We talked about some interesting stuff. We'll continue to have talks on this, like or discuss this topic.
We'll bring a morality expert
in, or even just the two of us too. Like I'll read the paper and then we can kind of pick up where we left off. That might be fun. I'll say some super brief housekeeping. We're gonna have our first guest on. We actually already recorded that interview. And it's going to come out next episode. So you're listening to this one. This episode will come out late tomorrow. Well, late on Monday, the 14th, I think. Yeah. And so you'll get it. You'll get our first interview next week. We're also going to record that episode on the Big Beautiful Bill. It'll be kind of late, not as timely, but I think it'll still be really interesting because we're going to use it as a launching off point to talk about things that we are knowledgeable about and things that interest us, and it'll be a good episode. So that'll come out maybe in 3 weeks. And we're now at a point, thankfully, where we have a kind of backlog of at least one episode, and we're going to continue to grow that backlog. So we'll never have another time where we kind of have to like jump on the mic and do something we're not prepared for, which will be good. And
we're still we're still working through it too.
And also just sorry about the background noise. And you could hear some of Anthony's end, some of his family, and then my dogs were barking and making noise, and I had to obviously rip these latex gloves out of my dog's mouth, because So sorry about that, but I thought this was a good episode, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
It really was.
Yep.
And we will catch you in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And really like look forward to the interview. It's really cool. We had a really cool guest on, and we can't end quite yet because I also want to say thank you for responding to our reel about calling for guest suggestions, because we got some good ones and some people that want to come on that we would love to have on. So
yeah, that's great.
More good guest episodes in the future very soon.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.